Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood. Episode 58, Sacrifices. In this episode, we get more fighting between greed and wrath. There's honestly quite a lot going on out there. And I wanted there to be more time spent with the sacrifices than we get. I'm being played with. Although I cannot be mad at what's going on with Hempstool right now. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. So, where to start here? I guess I'll just start at the beginning. Like I always act is so difficult and is actually the most logical place to start. We begin in the basement with Goldtooth Creep. And everybody is going, where the fuck did Ed just go? And he says, don't worry about that. You'll be joining him soon enough. Which actually came as kind of a surprise to me. Because I was assuming that the fate of the rest of the city was going to turn out to be a totally different thing than what happens to Ed and company. Ed and the Sacrifice sounds like a band. I don't know if when he says that, he already is planning on doing what he suggests later. Because what he eventually gets around to saying is, I don't have enough sacrifices. There were supposed to be 5. It looks like we've only got 3. So I'm going to need you to do this transmutation, this human transmutation, so that you can then be another sacrifice. And he might have already had that in mind when he said you're going to wind up there soon enough. But correct me if I'm wrong. Is Hempstool one of the sacrifices, like an official sacrifice? Or is he just like a different, because he was the original Philosopher's Stone made into a human being. And I can't recall, because we did see at one point Father sitting, making his plan and listing every person and what role they would play. And I couldn't remember if he fell into sacrifice, because it seems like he may not. Damien says yes. Okay. Yes, he's a single sacrifice. Michael, the sacrifices really should unionize. Unionization is the way to go, everybody. Let's all do it. Podcasters. So Roy is the one that's going to have to go next in order for there to be an even 5. I say even. That's not an even number, but you get what I mean. And Goldtooth is annoyed at the fact that they didn't get all 5 like they were supposed to. When he says that, is he trying to say that somebody else was supposed to have tried human transmutation and they didn't? Like, the energy I got from that was we were trying to tempt another person into doing it so that they could be an option, and they didn't. But I don't know if I'm reading into that too much. And I don't know whether or not there is a overall plan here that was in place to try and get Ed and Al to attempt this. I'm going to straighten out my chair, so forgive me if this sounds nuts on the recording, everybody. Ugh. I got to get one of those chair things that straightens your back out. But don't remember if we hear specifics about what happens to Ed and Al's mother and why she died. Did she just get sick? Because I feel like we heard something about it, but I don't recall. And I'm wondering if there was like a setup here that was supposed to get the two of them to do this. And I'm like really mixed on my feelings with this. If it was a setup from the beginning, part of me kind of feels like, I don't know. I mean, obviously they'd still have to make their choice. It wouldn't be like they were forced into it. But there's also a sort of, I don't know. There's a sense sometimes for me, and this is not necessarily always the case. There is a sense sometimes that if everything was set up right from the beginning, it's almost too much. And yet, there are other times where it's turning out that everything was set up from the beginning is really satisfying and feels like right or clever. And it's a really difficult needle to thread. I don't even really know sometimes how to explain why one works and one doesn't. Does that make sense? So my overall feeling of like, was it possible that they got set up to do this so that they could eventually be used as sacrifices? Because like the Fuhrer was very much already in place. And these two kids just happen to be Hempstool's kids. It just feels a little bit too tidy and convenient. So I'm just going to say right now, if it turns out to be a setup, I am not sure how I'm going to feel about it. It's going to depend on a lot of different mitigating factors and circumstances. But I want to mention that it occurred to me at this point. Up to now, I've been sort of willing to just go with the idea that like Al and Ed are involved in this due to who their father is without being able to choose. There's nothing voluntary about their overall involvement with this situation. But I don't know whether or not Hempstool's kids would have been a factor here in the first place, because I am assuming Ed and Al's traveling through the portal of truth is what makes them an option for sacrifice. And that's what we've been told. But what if it's simply their relation to Hempstool? And that's part of it, or all of it. Hempstool being able to have children surprised me to begin with. So, you know, the fact that he is like immortal, but he's still able to procreate, that's not something I see a lot in stories. Usually being immortal is sort of, there are like restrictions on what you can still do. You sacrifice part of what it means to be a person, which is often procreating, for the sake of living forever. And it's interesting to me that the suggestion looks like he was never into another woman other than Ed and Al's mom. But for thousands of years, really? Okay, I mean, maybe. Or maybe he just never knocked anybody up, and she was like the first one that it managed to work. Or he didn't think he could, and it was an accident. Let's see. Damien says there was an illness sweeping the area. They were being lazy and just hunting for people who had already done it rather than tempting people into doing it. Okay. Michael says, wouldn't it be crazy if they had also a PSYOPs campaign to try and get Havoc to do human transmutation and we just never saw any of it? Honestly, it would be pretty funny if they did just like try and tempt a huge number of people and see who it worked on. It wouldn't be funny because they'd be committing lots of murders in order for this to happen. But the idea that they're just like killing somebody and then casually like dropping a booklet on human transmutation, like, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know how I dropped that. But you keep it. I have another copy. And just like really obviously planting stuff B. Moore says, Father had no idea Ed and Al existed until they stumbled into his basement, assuming more humans would be tempted, and so they'd have their choice of sacrifices. That was the thing, is that the fact that he didn't know who they were, I wasn't really sure whether Father was going to need the information. Because, like, I still, up to this moment, don't really know what kind of connection Father has to the homunculi and whether them knowing something means he also knows it. So I was wondering, like, is it possible the homunculi are doing shit out there that Father isn't even aware of? Because Greed is out here defecting. He's doing whatever the fuck. And from being inside his head or Ling's head, depending, I don't get the sense that Father is able to, like, read their minds. But they just may not have shown that to us. April says, I had no idea it was another way they underestimated humans, assuming more humans would be tempted, and so they'd have their choice of sacrifices. Oh, I had this idea. Sorry, I misread that. April says, I had this idea. It was another way they underestimated humans. I like that, actually. The idea that they're figuring people are going to be very grasping about holding on, and fewer people actually do that than they expected. I like that concept. Topher says, I don't like when the bad guy was the absolute mastermind behind every little aspect of everything. It breaks suspension of disbelief to me. Topher, I think that's it. I think, because I was saying it's kind of hard to put into words sometimes, but I think that's when it feels a little cheap to me, is when it seems like somebody is so utterly in control of all these details that it doesn't otherwise feel believable they would ever be able to control. And there are going to be times where that's part of it. Finding out that somebody had control when you never expected it, that's part of what makes the reveal effective. But it's been done so often recently, and the thing that I always think of, and it's not really the same thing, but it's similar, is that trope that we've had going on a lot in movies over the past 10 years, which is he wanted to be arrested. He wanted to be in prison. He's here because he planned on it. He set this all. You think that you got him, but really he's exactly where he wants to be. That whole thing is really played. And I think that you need there to be some elements of chance and choice in it, or else it just starts to kind of feel like you got played as a reader, and that's not usually very fun. Sometimes it works, but it's just the kind of thing that, like, you guys know how I feel about doing sorts of like twist endings and stuff just for the sake of it, when it maybe doesn't necessarily make sense or whatever. Sometimes I feel like maybe authors just want to be patted on the back for planning something so tricky so far ahead. And that's not like, this isn't a D&D campaign, you know, this is supposed to be like storytelling. It's not the same. Let's see. Hempstool is completely human in every physical regard. He just has half the souls of Xerxes inside him, making him a philosopher's stone. I think that's the part that I have trouble with, is like, he's completely human, but he does like heal from wounds in a pretty, like, in a similar way to the homunculi. Am I wrong? This is really the issue I have here, is less with Hempstool than it is with the homunculi overall, which is like Lust in one scene tells Mustang, I'm pretty much exactly the same as a human, except for the Philosopher's Stone. And then she proceeds to make knives out of her hands and turn to dust and reformulate around the stone with a full new body. And I was like, no, you don't get to say that you're basically a human and then do all that crazy shit. You're not. You're just not. Just saying you are doesn't make it a real thing. Beemore says, my fridge logic notion for why they actually discouraged alchemists from performing human transmutation is because they didn't want any humans delving into that field of study, because then more people might notice what all of Amestris was being set up for. Too many to keep quiet. Had to walk a tight line to keep this secret, to keep this all secret, working up to this moment. Okay. I could see that. Just basically, like, if people get information about this particular ritual, they may start to notice some other weird parallels. Damien says, walking the tightrope of tempting humans with something taboo versus keeping people from researching too far. This is all very interesting. I like it. I like these little, like, you know, theorizing and sort of wondering. So after Goldtooth says this, we see Ed's iris, the like gold eye that he has, and he's wrapped up in all of these creepy arm hand shadow things, and he's being pulled through. And it was funny to me because he's like, wait, what's happening? And then eventually he's like, oh, it's like when we went into the portal of truth. And I'm like, fucking duh, Ed, catch up. What are you talking about? Of course that's what it is. How many other times have you seen these little like shadow hands that totally pull you apart to pieces and drag you into another place? Why have you not put this together already? And then we get like the title card and we go back to the fight with Wrath and Greed. And I had said in the end of the last episode, Greed gets Wrath in the eye, and he gets him in the eye in a way that from the side, it was really hard to tell exactly how bad the wound was. So when we come back and Wrath is fighting like nothing happened, for a minute I was like, wait, did I imagine that? But it's basically that he got him in the homunculus eye, if you will. I'm so sorry. But truly, that is actually like low-key what I'm saying. So I don't know if that actually has disabled his eye entirely, but it isn't healing right away. And that was interesting. I wasn't really sure why not, because otherwise they always heal. Is it because it's the spot where that like tattoo brand, I'm not really sure what to call it, where the mark is, that it makes it actually more like delicate? I don't know. I was just waiting for this to heal up, and it doesn't look like it did for this entire scene. And that is not to say that I think that he's, I think that he has sustained some damage, but based on what we have seen every other homunculi come back from, he should be able to come back from this. He gets pierced through the middle by Buccaneer, yeah, but I don't think there's anything particularly special about the weapon he's punctured with that should make it an unhealable wound for him. If Lust can reformulate her entire body from scratch around the Philosopher's Stone Mustang's holding in his hand, Wrath should be able to... Is it different because he started out as a human? Is that like... Is there just a different restriction on that for him? I've been sort of going under the assumption that he works the same as all the other homunculi, but I guess I'm forgetting about the fact that he originated as just a regular person. Maybe that changes what he's able to do. And if that's so, I'm willing to accept it, but I would like if the show was able to establish that a little bit more, because the rules on some of this stuff feels loosey-goosey in a way that seems like you could just exploit that and do whatever, and I wouldn't really know whether it was like within the rules you've set up for yourself or not. But anyway, so they go flying, both Greed and Wrath, over the like side of the parapet, and Greed for a minute holds on to the crenellation, and he is about to fall because Wrath is holding on to him, and all of a sudden Lanfan reaches over the side and grabs them with her automail arm. And for a second, I'm like, oh, sick, automail arm. This is going to be, she'll be able to pull him up. No. It starts pouring blood down the automail arm because that shit is like linked into her actual flesh. And all of this weight is pulling the arm. And honestly, there have been a lot of injuries on this show, but somehow this made me cringe the hardest. This was like, oh God, that sounds horrible. And I mean, like I said, we've seen some shit. It's been, but this, it was just like, a lot of the injuries I think just feel so wildly out of the realm of reality that I would ever have to deal with. But an attachment to deal with like a limb loss, that feels much more grounded. And the idea of it just getting yanked like this when it's bolted into your, not only like bones and stuff, but your nervous system is locked in with it as well. No, thank you. Topher says, I don't think Wrath healed because he had to be sneaky amongst the humans. Lust's body was manufactured, but Wrath and Greedling don't, I think. Damien says, I imagine due to Bradley's unique physiology, he's probably much more limited in how to recharge his healing like the others, aka getting reabsorbed by Father and coming back with more lives. So he's probably taken quite a bit of damage over the years and can't repair it as easily. Okay. Willing to accept, like I said, but I just wish that there was a little bit more on that. This is the thing, is that when you're setting up a story where so much has to be secret up until the end, I understand why I can't get more information. But the formation of Bradley has been told to us, like him being created and the entire way that happened. We've gotten a pretty much step-by-step on how they did it, so I don't think it would have been impossible for them to get that across a little bit more clearly. So anyway, Lanfan is holding on to Greed and bleeding onto him, and he is like, your automail can't support this weight. Let go and go take care of the old man. And she says, it's too late for him. And there's a moment where she's crying and her tear hits his face and like washes the blood away. And I don't know why, but I just love that moment. It was like this little, just felt very symbolic. So I had to laugh here because she finally yells to one of the Briggs guys to help. And honestly, there are two men here. There has been a very attention-grabbing fight with two very particular people who just went flying over the edge. She's leaning and these two men have no interest. They are absolutely oblivious. What are you doing? Get a hold of yourselves. Pay attention, sir. I mean, they may as well have their fucking cell phones out tweeting about it. Get on the job. So they come over, and this one guy leans over the side and says, here, King Bradley, take this. And he shoots at Bradley, who throws his knife at the soldier and gets the soldier in the shoulder. And I was really irritated because for a second I just thought Bradley was going to totally take this guy down and still be able to hang on. But the shot gets him. He falls into the water and we see him like sinking quite far. He's like in the moat, I think is what this is. And we see him sinking in this cloud of blood around him. And there is no follow-up. So all we do is see him like plummeting towards the bottom of this moat. And we don't know anything about what happens to him afterward. And everybody's just sort of hoping that either he's dead, but most people seem to pretty much agree that's unlikely, or that he has been injured to such a degree he is going to be easier to take out now. So then we have Ling coming up over the side, and he is yelling to everybody about how we need help. Somebody, I have a Philosopher's Stone. This is a mistress. Is there nobody who can help? And I was struck because I thought for sure he already realized that Fu was dead. But this is the first time, like when Lan Fan said it, it's too late for him. He seems truly shocked. And I really thought he had realized what had happened to Fu. And granted, he had some other shit going on at the time. So I'm not mad that he didn't notice. I just thought he did. And so when he comes up here and has to deal with this loss, it was really awful. Like him desperately trying to get help, and the way that some of the soldiers just sort of like look away from him. And it's not in a shame-faced way. It's in a sympathetic, like, I know this feeling kind of way. Like they are recognizing the experience he's having right now. And he starts crying, and it's just like, how can there be nobody? And falls to his knees, and somebody fucking shoots him in the fucking head. And it's this soldier who just says, "Take that, damn monster." And I don't remember this guy. If I was supposed to, I apologize. But this came out of nowhere, and I will not lie. I thought this dude was dead. I thought Greed was dead, because it seemed very much like Ling was in control at this moment. And there was a part of me that wasn't really sure if Ling is the one that's forefront in the control of the body. Do Greed's abilities still count? And I wasn't entirely sure, but it turns out he's okay. And it's just a kind of interesting thing to throw into the mix that he got shot right between the eyes. There's like a scar there for the rest of this episode. And I don't know if that's going to mean something, but it felt like a bit of a non sequitur considering the fact that he is fine now. It just, I don't know, it was a weird moment. So part of me is like, this has to mean something, right? I don't know. But anyway, this is when Ling is saying, "I have finally gained immortality, and I can't even save one of my own subjects. Damn it." And this is something that I really like, is the fact that somebody who's like trying to attain immortality for the sake of their people, they have to come to the realization that it's not actually going to have that kind of effect on their people. All it's going to do is make them impossible to damage and extend their life. But the idea that it grants you like other powers, nobody ever said that. You're just kind of hoping, I think, that's what's going to happen. Nobody ever said that was part of the deal. And it makes a lot of sense to me that somebody would assume it would be part of the deal. If you're going to go for immortality, the idea that maybe you get some bonus powers, I mean, may as well, So I'm not mad at him for kind of expecting to be able to do more here. But I like him being brought back down to earth a little bit and realizing maybe my life isn't at risk the way it was, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing at risk anymore. That doesn't mean that there aren't consequences to the shit that happens just because I am going to make it through to the other side, hopefully. That still, there are real people involved that are not going to be able to come back and are not impervious to shit. And sometimes you need to just be reminded of that, So this is when Buccaneer starts like doing his cough, his, "Oh, I'm on the edge of death. Oh, And I gotta tell you guys, this episode worked for me. This part with Buccaneer, though, his actual death, I really thought was well done. But it drags too much. He's just like half alive for so long, and people keep just yelling his name. And the idea of people standing around watching him die and just yelling Buccaneer felt really goofy to me. It's just, I can't see yelling somebody's name as they're like going over a cliff. You're desperately trying to reach out and save them, like a different circumstance. This makes sense. But they're standing around on this like rooftop watching this man bleed out with a very serious wound. And they have already all said his name several times. And this just goes on for a while. And what he asks here. He's first of all like, hey, Ling, thank you very much for setting me up. And Ling is like, you made sure that Fu's death wasn't in vain. So I appreciate that, but I can't fucking do anything for you. You're still dying. So what good am I? And as he's saying this, the guys inside who have been holding everybody off the stairs and away from the this big entrance in the building with the machine guns, they all run out of ammo at the same time. So they're all going to have to fall back. And Buccaneer tells Ling basically, I need you to help follow up on orders that I was given that I won't be able to fulfill anymore. There is the primary objective was to keep them from being able to get to this particular door. And if you can step in and help us out with that, keep this gate from opening until we get the all clear from our general, that would be the payback that you seem to want to be able to give me. And it's so funny because it takes a really long time for Ling to respond. And he says something about how, like, with your power, you might be the only one that's able to do this. And Ling looks to the different, like the brig soldiers that are up here, and then at Lan Fan. And he then says, he looks at Fu, poor Fu, man. There's so much blood. That man, he really went for it though, I gotta say. He says, greed, I need your power. Give it to me. And there's something really funny about when he says, greed, I need your power. Greed is just like, huh? And Greed says, okay, there's still a little more time left before what I have to do. And I was like, word? What is that? What are you up to, buddy? Huh? What you doing? Greed, I forgot that you had like your own whole thing happening. What you doing? What are you doing, Greed? What do you got planned? Ling doesn't ask any questions. He's distracted. I understand. But I just completely lost track of the fact that Greed had his own shit happening that he was planning on doing. So here comes the moment where Ling rips the sleeves off of his own jacket. And honestly, this is a whole look. I was into it. He does that like metal armor, skin, whatever, up to his neck. But it isn't until like way later that he winds up engaging it over his face. And I had forgotten how creepy it looks. It's a very like it. I was trying to remember because I knew that ability extended all the way over his head and face. I remembered that like you could activate that, but I couldn't recall what it looked like. And I was trying to imagine, is it just basically like a metal version of the face, the human face that he wears? But no, it's like a lot more mechanical looking. But it's just so cool looking also. So he says, I'm a man of Xing and people from Xing keep their word. And he heads out there and just decides to go to town. This is Ling being like, I couldn't help save this guy who meant a lot to me, or this other dude who ensured that his death meant something. And since I couldn't do that, I will go out here and give 150%. So he starts getting lowered down like on this sort of platform thing, and he tells them all, if you have a family, go home. If you don't want to get hurt, leave now. Oh yeah, and ladies, I won't fight women. I'm not that kind of guy. And I was not sure how I felt about that, because on the one hand, I know that it's a thing in a lot of like media that they don't want to have a man beating up women It just doesn't look good. So they avoid that, and they will often come up with a female counterpart for like the main villain for another female to like character protagonist to fight, and that way it's woman on woman instead. But there was also a part of me that was just like, the show is not great about the representation of women in the military in general. Like, we have Hawkeye and we have Ross, but it feels like we very rarely see them out in the field that often, occasionally. So part of me was like, I don't know if if you even needed to say anything. You could just not have any women in this scene at all, and I wouldn't really think anything of it, to be perfectly honest, because there are not women in a lot of the scenes with soldiers in groups, you know? Or maybe it was supposed to signify that Greed is like drawing a line himself, that he has a code. Or maybe this was supposed to be Ling himself being like, yeah, I'm going into this, but I am not going to cross this particular line for myself. I don't know. But anyway, he heads down, they begin firing on him, and it's either bouncing off or just leaving like small marks that heal up immediately. They even launch a bazooka at him. And that is when he comes through the bazooka smoke and he's got that like crazy helmet face on. And he just like leaps on them. He's jumping around like an orangutan, like a chimp. Guys, did you watch Nope? Show of hands. Who saw Nope? Because when I say that he jumped like a chimp, that should be very scary to you. Oh, man. But anyway, he absolutely like unloads on these guys, and there are platforms sliding down, like shit is going haywire, and there are these shafts that can be seen from the outside where the stairways are that are blowing up. Even on the outside, people can see huge plumes of smoke that come down out the opening, and basically like the implication is that the entrances to get up this way are completely blocked at this point. And all of the guys on the ground level are behind these like sandbag walls. And Greed comes out and you just see his feet. And then the body of a soldier just drops because he clearly was carrying this guy probably like by the belt. And he just lets go of him in the most undignified heap. And he's walking toward them with those fucking teeth. I swear to God. And they yell fire. And he's doing the T-1000 thing. And all of a sudden, a van comes out of nowhere and slams into him. And this felt very like... Is it Regina George that gets hit? Remind me, fellas. But it felt like that, except that he could actually fight back. This was extremely sudden, and I was like, wait, what? But then you see him digging his crazy hands into the actual engine of the truck, and he leaps off it and the fucking thing explodes. There is nothing I think funnier than a vehicle always exploding when somebody has finished with it. It's like one of my most favorite gags. It's completely justified here. It doesn't feel like a gag, but I still sort of interpret that way because there's not really a great reason why it needs to blow up to this level. It's just the effect of it. But, guys, I watched Sonic the Hedgehog 2 a few weeks back. And there is an amazing moment where an angry bride comes rolling up on a golf cart and jumps off the golf cart as it continues on. And it explodes in the background behind her while she takes a swig out of a champagne bottle. And honestly, best part of the movie, the golf cart exploding was so good. So anyway, everybody is watching this fucking unbeatable monster here. And he is making no effort to not seem monstrous. He is grabbing people by the one guy here. He's got by the like suspenders, and he's got blood trickling down his hands, and all these dudes are sweating. And then we eventually go up to the Briggs guys, and they're just like, I am really glad he's on our side. Holy shit. I can't help but wonder, Lanfan is watching all this too. And I'm like, what does Lanfan think of this whole situation? Because like, this is a guy that she knows and is meant to protect, but he's also very clearly in a position where he doesn't need protecting right now, you know? And then as this is all happening, we cut to these various people in town and all of them being told through the radio that they're not supposed to come outside. And there's an old couple and is this Hughes's wife? Is that who this is supposed to be? But she wants to go visit a friend. They had like a plan for the day, and because of what's going on, they can't leave the house. And it was an interesting thing because, again, I'm not entirely, it felt like a non sequitur, but I guess it's just supposed to sort of establish for us that there aren't civilians just running around in the street. And that's fine. I don't know if the old couple were people I was supposed to recall, but Hughes and his daughter, it's weird because we know them, and I feel like I should know the old people too then, but no. So then we go to the crowd on the stairs where Izumi just disappeared, and poor Sig is freaking out. Like, of course. You just saw your wife disintegrate in front of your face. And all of them are trying to, like, get any information on what could actually be going on. They don't know where she went, and the only thing that they have to offer is Major Armstrong being like, that kind of looks like what Ed described regarding going through the portal of truth. And I wonder if that's sort of what's happening. And when General Armstrong presses him and is like, do you know anything more about that? He's like, I really don't. I'm sorry. And one of the Briggs guys comes upon their party and tells them about Buccaneer dying and just generally all of the they have sustained casualties, but they have injured Bradley. Of course, this fucking dude is like, no, they can't have killed Bradley. He's stronger than that. Sir, how many times do you need to be bashed in the face before you remember this is a place to keep your fucking mouth shut? Genuinely, shut up. What are you doing? I mean, honestly, just kill him at this point. I just kill him. He's tiresome. What are you doing with him? I'm very interested, actually, now that I say that. There's a reason he's still here, right? What is he? What's up with him? Anyway, this is when the Briggs guy tells them that greed is like on their side. And everybody's like, wait, what? And of course, this fucking, the good gentleman would never be betrayed by the homunculi. And I'm like, yo, you just got smacked again. Why? This man does not know how to keep his fucking mouth shut. And Buccaneer died with a smile on his face. And General Armstrong says, all right, well, if he died with a smile on his face, I don't think that he'd like for all of us to stand around weeping over him. So let's get our shit together. And she says, Mr. Sig, come with us. We need to find your wife as well. And I kind of felt for him here because, of course, he's not going to leave. Izumi disappeared here. You're not going to just, like, leave the site of your wife's disappearance. But also, the plan was for him and Izumi to bail and for all of the actual soldier types to stick around and fight because that's what their job is as soldiers. And now, because of the way this went, he doesn't get to just leave. And I just really hated that for him, you know? So this is when we go to Ed and Izumi both landing in this weird open area. And it takes a long time for Al to come through. The two of them almost land at the same time. And Al comes through and he doesn't move. There is no animation to him. It's like, I don't know what to think about the fact that Al isn't responding. Because we saw him when he got on the street. It's Al that got. But otherwise, why would it be different, him being pulled through? Is this part of the plan? Or is this like a weird accident that Father didn't really think through? I don't know. But this is when they turn around and we get to see Hohenheim upside down, wrapped in Father's weird body. And y'all, I didn't process right away that Hohenheim was like whole and just sort of upside down. I thought that this was just random body parts sticking out because he had been like torn apart or something. And I was so creeped out. Once you realize that he's sort of whole and like, it's like a action figure that got wrapped in Play-Doh, I was like, oh, okay, this is like way less freaky then. It's still super freaky, but it wasn't what I was imagining. And all I could think is like, if this is what Father's doing and he's not dead, he absorbs him when Hempstool starts trying to talk too much. But he's not dead. I was like, is this what he's planning to do to like all of them? Is just like wrap his entire being around them and just absorb them into himself? And why? What would that do? I still don't know what it is that he's trying for here. So yeah, this is when he's saying to himself, we're still one short. Perhaps the fifth is being created as we speak. And Hohenheim says to Edward, you're here. And it seems that they got Alphonse as well. And Izumi. You'll have to excuse my sorry appearance. This dude. It's, the way that Father is talking, his giant mouth and his 3 eyes that are all different sizes. I really enjoy this design. Super creepy. And this is when Hohenheim is like, this is the guy that was called Father. Remember him? And I destroyed the leather sack that he was in. And this is when Father says, enough, I warned you to keep your mouth closed. And like sucks him in and his entire head disappears. And now, greetings to the 3 of you, my pretty sacrifices. Welcome to my castle. Please, everyone make yourselves at home. And this is when Ed says, Al, time to get up. And Al just, nothing. And Ed seems surprised, even though he had just been next to Al trying to get him to wake up and he wasn't. So I guess he just assumed Al was like knocked out and was going to come back to himself if he gave him a few minutes. But it's just such a weird, like, I just found it, he's got a lot to think about, granted. But I was just surprised at how suddenly anxious he got when I would have been anxious right away. Like, that would have been distracting me throughout this entire thing, is the fact that he's not responding to me at all. So this is when we get back to Goldtooth. And he's like, I can't believe that they couldn't even get 5 measly sacrifices. They did only go after people who were stupid enough to take the bait of something small, like immortality. Oh. What? Wait. That doesn't feel small. Okay. But what he decides to do here, first he tries to just convince Roy to do the sacrifice, the transmutation, to bring back a friend of his that he missed. And Hughes is brought up, which of course makes him quite angry. And as this is being presented as an option, all of these other like extra soldiers that were the initial prototypes, they get him and Hawkeye and Scar in positions where they cannot fight back. Scar has a blade on each side of his throat. Mustang's glove gets sliced so that he can't use the transmutation circle on it anymore, and he's like been grabbed by each arm. There's a guy with his forearm pressed against Hawkeye's like windpipe so that she can't breathe if he just decides, everybody has been basically completely taken down for the moment. And Goldtooth is trying to convince Roy to bring somebody back, and it's very clear Roy is not going to do this. He's not interested. So Goldtooth does something actually pretty smart. And he has one of the soldiers cut Hawkeye's neck. Slice her throat. And I should have seen that coming if he was going to try and get him to do this. I did not. And this sucks. Hawkeye deserves better. It's not like... I don't want to call this fridging. First of all, she's not dead yet. And she is an actual character. She's not some paper cutout that is just used for a purpose. She isn't her own character. So she's important, and it's not that simple. But it just sucks every time that it's like, oh, the woman, her life is being threatened, and now it's a thing. All right, I guess. Sure. So, throughout all of this, the camera keeps going back to Scar, who is just sullen and just staring and watching all of this happen with a real vibe of like, I don't even really need to be here for this. I don't even get it. Like, can I just go? There's something about every time they pan over to him, he just doesn't feel like part of this anymore. And that's not to say that he's not, but you know what I'm saying? It was a weird thing to constantly be reminded he's still there. Because otherwise I would have completely forgotten about him. So maybe that's the purpose of this. And the doctor is like, do you want to transmute her after she's already died? That would be acceptable. And Hawkeye says, I'm not gonna die. What you don't know is I'm under strict orders not to die. And the doctor says, if it were that easy to obtain an immortal body, my dear, it wouldn't be very sporting, now would it? Which is a pretty good answer, actually. So then he says, so tell me, Mustang, what'll it be? Your precious woman is about to die. If you don't act, she'll bleed to death. All of that blood right before your eyes. Luckily, I happen to be a doctor. And I have a philosopher's stone to add to the bargain. I am able, with all certainty, to save this woman's life. But if you don't make up your mind in time, there is nothing I can do. And the camera zooms in on his eye, Roy's eye, who it really doesn't seem like he knows what he wants to do here. And I am certain he's going to take the deal to save her life. If he doesn't, I'll actually be kind of impressed. Like, I don't want her to die, don't get me wrong. But if he is able to set aside the way that he feels about her just to keep them from getting the next sacrifice that they need, that's really putting your money where your mouth is, you know? I don't know. So anyway, she gets very still all of a sudden, and he says maybe she's dead already, and she speaks up to sort of let him know that she's not, and says, you don't have to do this. Don't sacrifice everything for my sake. And the doctor says, but you will, won't you, Mustang? And he is so confident. And I'm like, has he done this exact thing before? Like, he just really, truly believes. And it doesn't feel like a put on. So Roy looks at her. There's one moment of like really seeming, because he's really angry throughout all this, but there's a moment where it looks like he's going to start crying. And the camera pulls away from him and we just hear him say, "All right." It was so quiet, you guys, that I missed it. I saw the doctor smile, and I knew that couldn't be good. So I had to rewind it. But I really was like, maybe he won't do it. And I am assuming he's actually going to go through with it. But part of me is like, is he going to pretend to sort of distract and waste time and then not? But he's going to do it. I feel like if I were Hawkeye, I'd be pretty mad at him. You know? Like, you've been putting it all on the line this far to keep them from being able to do the thing. And yeah, I'm dying, but also, like, we went into this knowing that was, like, a possibility. And we're going to be stopping them from sacrificing the entire country. Letting me die is actually small potatoes. It's fine. And I'm not trying to say that I would be sanguine about it. Like, I'm not trying to pretend I would just face my death. You know, of course not. But when you look at their entire mission, it feels like if he goes through with this, it's just completely undermining everything that they worked for. Like the whole point. And I would be pissed. I mean, what is he saving her life for? How long is she going to stay alive if they sacrifice everybody in the city in a minute anyway? Why save her? Why do this? She's going to die. It's just going to be a little bit more time from now. I don't know. So that's where we're at. And I'm trying to think, like, the overall sacrifice concept, because this is called sacrifices, but like I said, we don't get a lot of time with the actual sacrifices in question who have already gone over. And I was thinking that they were being pulled through the portal of truth, and I think that they were, but the place that they are isn't the place that we saw that was all like blank whiteness with the weird two doors. This is a very different location. And I've been assuming that the being Ed encountered when he went through the first time, that was sort of that weird outline, childlike sort of looking thing, I was assuming that and the dwarf in the jar were kind of the same being in some ways. And I'm beginning to realize there's not really any reason to believe that. I assumed, because they have the same vibe to them. And they're coming from the same void, basically. But other than that, why think that? I don't know. So where they are, I was fully expecting when they started to break apart that they would come together and be in that white space near where Al's body is. And maybe that's why the suit of armor isn't moving. Maybe him being brought through, he has reunited with his body already, and he is like somewhere else. But is that maybe he needs to be in his body to be sacrificed? Maybe that's like the point. I don't know. Kids. It's all over the place. And meanwhile, Greed is still out here planning his own thing. So what's he going to do? I assume he knows they need 5 sacrifices. And he's not trying to stop that part. So, and my assumption has been, if they make those sacrifices, that is what's going to be the initial trigger to, like, actually, you know what? I don't know. Because they already triggered the transmutation circle with the 5 labs, right? So does each sacrifice have to be brought to a separate lab and sacrificed there? I got the impression from the way that we've seen these circles work, it has to be a location where a lot of blood was shed and lives were lost. And those labs seem like they already fit the bill. So now that I stop and think about it, I'm actually not really sure what the deal is with the circle. Was the circle simply to open the portal so that they would get pulled through? And why did it only seem to work on them if it was triggered properly? Wouldn't anybody who walked into it go through also? Guys, I don't know what's happening. I don't know. I don't know anything. Is this fun to listen to? Like, I feel like a friggin' hamster running around in a wheel. And sometimes I'm like, am I boring? Is me just like spitballing weird theories and shit that I don't understand? Is that fun? Because I feel like sometimes I'm not delivering. I gotta be honest. I don't know. But here I am. And here you all are. So I guess it's something. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap. But thank you guys all again very, very much for coming and hanging out. I appreciate you all. And thank you, Max, for commissioning this episode. And until next week, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.